things like streetscapes, parks, and enjoy creating active public spaces like this, and just enjoy the opportunity to work with you guys on this project.
Yeah, we do a variety of landscape architecture and civil engineering projects, some residential and commercial developments, and as Jason mentioned, parks and public spaces, and we are really excited to be working with Brevard on this.
All right, well, thank you guys. And like I said, we're also very excited to be a part of this project with Downtown Brevard. And it's not every day we get to work on something that's right here in our town. So excited to work with everyone on this. And also just to remind everyone that, we certainly have been working in close detail with the Downtown Master Plan Committee. And just so everyone knows who all is a part of that, that involves a couple of our city council members, as well as the city planning staff, Heart of Brevard representation, as well as appointed citizen members. And so we just wanted to highlight, this committee as well, because they have been involved throughout the process for the past several months and helped guiding the direction of the master plan. And certainly if you have any questions, I'm sure they would entertain those outside of this meeting and later on if you want to know more about the process. And just to help familiarize everyone with the scope of what we have been looking at during this process, the previous streetscape study that was done back in 2012, primarily focused on Broad Street and Main Street and improvements leading into downtown as well as in those core areas. And so part of our goal as we were developing this master plan was to really think a little further about the scope of improvements that we were looking for in downtown and think about how we can really help expand the downtown core and help create a more consistent feel through some of the adjacent streets throughout downtown, and just also really kind of help promote, long-term development for the rest of downtown Brevard. And then just to give you an overview of the schedule, we started this, really kind of back at the beginning of this year, and starting with our existing conditions and review and analysis of downtown. We had a conceptual master plan that we met with and reviewed with the Downtown Master Plan Committee back in March. We also reviewed a lot of that with NCDOT just to make sure that we were recommending things that were consistent with some of their guidelines, since we do have a lot of restrictions on Broad Street and Main Street because of the state highways. And now, we just presented the preliminary master plan, which you're going to see here today, to the Downtown Master Plan Committee last week. And so we have 4 stakeholder meetings total planned this week, as well as one of them with the city and county is going to be in early May. And then next month, we're going to be taking the information that we've gathered here today and through all of our stakeholder meetings and really develop that into a final master plan in May and June. And so I'm sure many of you probably think this is a very aggressive schedule, and it is a very aggressive schedule. And part of the reason that we are trying to do this in such a tight time frame is that we are trying to be prepared for another grant opportunity. The city submitted for a build grant in the past few years. That program has now changed under the new administration and is called RAISE. And that notification for funding was just issued, I believe, last week and will be due in July. So our goal is to come up with a master plan that would be ready to incorporate into that application in July and would need, approval by City Council in June. And so just, we're not designing the details of all of this. This is still a master plan, and there will be more input and more design that'll be required after, we move forward with this. But this is certainly a roadmap and a guide that can be included to really help improve our chances and help support the application process for that RAISE grant. And so just to help everyone visually understand the process that we outlined, we mentioned in the schedule, we're somewhat kind of 3/4 of the way through if you look at how we divided it up into these 4 phases. But we're not going to go through all of the detail and the deliverables today, but we have started to put, as Nicole mentioned, we have started to think about how this plan could be implemented in smaller pieces over time, and have started to think about those priorities and the cost. But that's something we're not going to focus on today. We're really going to look higher level at the ideas and concepts and make sure that's something that everyone is interested in moving forward with. And just to give everyone an overview of those priorities that we presented in the surveys that went out earlier this year, and also identifying some of the Downtown Master Plan Committee goals, these are really those objectives that we were trying to identify and reinforce and gather your feedback on to help guide the plan. So we were really looking at trying to reinforce our downtown's identity and sense of place, looking at mobility, safety, and accessibility throughout downtown. Heart of Brevard has also done a walkability survey, and so we certainly are trying to take in all of that information as well. And we really want to make sure that we're promoting the economic vitality and future development in Brevard as well. And some of the Downtown Master Plan Committee goals, as Nicole mentioned, that we are very clearly trying to come up with a plan that can be implemented and not be a plan that sits on the shelf for the next 10 or 20 years. So we want to make sure we come up with some ideas that have incremental projects to help show progress and build momentum, but also guide this future development. And so you'll also see a couple of the near-term priorities, which seem like maybe small things if we talk about traffic signal coordination or trying to add more trees or replace trees. But interestingly, these are all still very complicated things that take a lot of work that we definitely want to work towards in the near future. And just to give some overview information from the survey data, we sent this out to key stakeholders, and it was also open to the general public through the city's website and Facebook page. So you can see the list of some of the key stakeholders that responded. And we also had key response in Heart of Brevard and wanted to highlight some of those responses. So when we're looking at some of the most beneficial improvements for businesses, certainly we're trying to highlight trees and landscape and signage, wayfinding opportunities, and how we can improve off-street parking. And then also just looking at the impact on downtown experience, sort of the top 3 responses really focused on landscaping, off-street parking, and creating that park and gathering space. And then, just looking a little broader at some of these survey data, not specific to Heart of Brevard, but, overall by different stakeholders, we wanted to highlight some of those top areas of concern and some of the priorities for improvements. So you can see here that, a lot of the ideas and, things that people are interested in are focusing on the connectivity to the different neighborhoods and through downtown, as well as connectivity to our outdoor recreational resources. Really looking at trying to improve, bike lanes and, mobility through downtown, just overall beautification and, the safety and walkability. So we've really tried to, take a lot of this into account to focus our efforts in our master plan. And so the master plan is going to be divided into these sort of key components, and we'll go through each of these in more detail. But before we really start to get into this, I just wanted to pause for a minute to see if there were any questions so far about the process and the scope of the project and, kind of what we've been through so far. All right, Geraldine. Hold on one second. I think we need to unmute. Sorry, can you unmute? Okay.
How many people responded? And you may have said that, but in total, out of the stakeholders, what is the surveys?
We had, I think it was 220 results, our survey responses. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions so far? All right, well, we'll move on to go through the master plan components now. So when we were looking at our master plan and focusing on, sort of the efforts of planning, we really wanted to think, outside, kind of looking at the gateway opportunities and how you approach Brevard and what the impact is to really help, guide your experience as you enter into the core of downtown. And so, one of the things that I think everybody notices is, the amount of traffic, the speed of traffic, noise, a lot of these things have a big impact on how people experience our downtown and really the safety, as they're walking around. And so we really wanted to look at different traffic calming strategies and try to make sure that we were creating safe opportunities for crosswalks into the different neighborhoods, that intersect and lead to downtown, but also trying to find ways that we can, potentially work with NCDOT and reduce some of the speed limits. I don't know if you really pay much attention, but when you're coming into town, the speed limit doesn't really drop to 20 miles an hour until about a block kind of from the core of downtown. And so, with the way our highways are designed, it's, really kind of a clear raceway almost. There's not really much to slow you down because we have, such corridor development on the ends kind of leading into downtown. So we wanted to look at opportunities that we could help, not only beautify, but use medians and, boulevard design to help slow some of that traffic, possibly look at narrowing travel lanes. Right now, certainly have pretty wide lanes that promote speed and safety for vehicles, but not really thinking about the pedestrian in downtown. And we also wanted to make sure that we're kind of thinking about improving and, branding and signage and being consistent with that approach and, making sure that we're highlighting some of the view corridors of our mountains and not, really designing elements that might block that, because that is a unique feature of Brevard that really helps capture our sense of place. And so, looking at NCDOT and some of their projects that are currently, in design and set to begin, this is the design at the intersection of Caldwell and Broad Street as you're coming into town. And so, this project is actually expected to begin at this year, and it involves, multiple roundabouts, on Highway 280 as you're coming into town. And so, we don't have a lot of ability to make changes to this, but we did want to kind of think that if this is really your gateway into downtown, right now there's a small sign that says "Welcome to Brevard." Maybe there's ways that we can work with DOT to help, provide landscaping and help soften that and really create consistent signage with other areas. As you're coming into town, the traffic pattern is really going to be impacted greatly by the implementation of these roundabouts leading into town. So this is really one area where maybe trying to also focus on truck directional signage that helps guide, through trucks that really don't need to be driving down Broad Street, that really should be taking Caldwell Street. Hopefully we can give them better information to know which direction they should be going. Because right now it's not very clear. A lot of those signs are kind of hidden behind trees or, pretty small in nature. So we're hopeful that we can work with them to help improve some of these to really help start slowing traffic before it ever gets into the core of downtown. And then also continuing to look at the safety and connectivity, we wanted to highlight some of these crosswalk areas with the different neighborhoods. Right now, there either are no crosswalks or, there's not really infrastructure or there's no lights and signals to make it safe there. But, maybe there's ways that we can introduce crosswalks that will also help start to slow traffic and make, drivers understand that they're entering closer into downtown and to help slow them down. So you can see potentially looking at adding some of these in red in our areas, further outside of the core of downtown, and then really just improving the ones that we have downtown and making them higher visibility and really, enhance those and really try to match the design and layout that was created on Cald Street when that work was completed. And then also really focusing on the signal and changes in the frequency, trying to work with DOT. The city has already initiated that with conversations to help work with them to reevaluate that because, the timing just is not really conducive for pedestrians in downtown circulation, but really just for moving traffic back and forth through town. And so, we just highlighted a couple of these core, intersections as you're coming into town. Certainly they need crosswalks and some modifications to the sidewalks, and a lot of them really do need some sidewalk improvements. And as you can see, there are some areas, particularly on Broad Street around Apple Tree, that are already going to be impacted with the potential hotel development. So, we're just trying to start to think about ways to make it safer for people to move from the neighborhoods into downtown, and try to help implement some of these traffic calming strategies. And then also, as you progress into the North Gateway, where this is looking at the at Broad Street, kind of leading up to the courthouse. And so, the previous plan also had developed a median concept. I think we've been looking at how we can maintain that to help slow traffic and help provide sort of a entrance and sort of signal that you're coming into downtown, but maybe looking at keeping that on the lower end of the hill so that we're not going to be obstructing views of the mountains. And certainly, we don't really know what's going to happen here in the parcel of exactly the design of the potential hotel if that comes into fruition. But there are opportunities to look at using the additional right-of-way for additional sidewalk and potential bike lanes to help use that as a creative way to help promote pedestrian connection from the bottom of the hill up to downtown. And so we also would like to look at potentially trying to create a left turn lane onto Main Street to help with some of the traffic backup and alleviate some of the flow of traffic that is currently using Probart Street as more, or Apple Tree, that's more of a bypass, so that we can help move traffic safely through downtown. That would require the loss of a few parking spaces that are along the McMinn building there, but potentially we can allocate those in other places. And then looking at South Broad Street by Varsity Street and leading up to Morgan Street and by the library, we're showing kind of here sort of an idea of a near-term and a long-term option. And so, long-term, it would be great to look at also kind of using some landscaped islands there. That's at the point where McNeely's and the Cardinal Drive-In is, and that's also at Oakdale, which is the intersection to sort of a connection to the Rosenwald community. And so, and the long term, there's certain ways that we can certainly beautify that corridor. There's already a lot of greenery around South Broad Park and the library, and there's opportunity on the other side of the road to help extend that that streetscape. We can narrow the lanes a little bit to help gather or to gain some additional green space and tree planting space. But we also wanted to look at introducing crosswalks. That's a long block, and without having any crosswalk, that really allows trucks and other vehicles to really gain a lot of momentum trying to come up to the hill before they approach downtown. So that would not only make it safe for people to move back and forth from the neighborhoods and across the street, but also just create a more inviting pedestrian experience. And in the near term, we're looking at we may not have the ability to implement all of this and right now, because of the cost of some of this, but we certainly can look at ways that we can start to stripe and reallocate space and get trucks and other vehicles and pedestrians sort of in the kind of using that pattern of movement and kind of get it adjusted to it before we really implement such a big change. And so that's why the near-term plan is really just suggesting more of a striping pattern. And with this, we're not really changing the number of vehicles or the traffic lanes, but we are looking at adding what you see kind of on South Broad Street on that sort of inside lane, or I'm sorry, the outside lane next to the parking has a bike share symbol. So that's a bike with kind of an arrow, and that really indicates that that lane could be shared with vehicles as well as bicycles. We're going to talk a little bit more later on about more specific bike boulevards, but since we don't have the width for a true bike lane, we can help to slow traffic, but also integrate different modes and promote bikes using, Broad Street as more of a regional connection, certainly that would be promoted more for experienced and, road cyclists, not necessarily your neighborhood, cyclists that want to get into downtown. And this is, just a kind of quick overview of what that could look like, kind of looking at the view and seeing, the travel lanes and the pedestrian space with some additional planting spaces on the side to help screen the vehicle lane from the sidewalk. And this is the East Gateway, kind of looking at Main Street as you're coming into town, and really starting to provide a similar effect. You kind of come in around the corner and come into town. It would be nice to eventually look at relocating and burying the overhead power lines as a way to kind of help create a more consistent feel and appearance, and also that would free up a lot more opportunity for more landscaping. But maybe there's ways that we can use a little bit of a landscape median to help frame that, and then open up your view as you get closer into downtown. And we're also showing, at the left there, across from Water Oak Suites, a bus stop. Right now, the Transylvania County has implemented, a bus route that has a couple of stops through town. So if there's ways that we can implement a more permanent stop within the streetscape, we would like to support that and promote that as a multi-mode or an alternate mode of transportation. And then, looking at downtown parking, we know that that has been a key concern, and we're really focused on, trying to promote, signage and wayfinding to a lot of these off-street parking areas to alleviate the pressure on Main Street. And so what we've done here is try to identify those different parking opportunities and strategies for whichever direction people are coming from, that we can provide the appropriate signage to get them to those parking lots, whether they're coming from the north, the south, or the east, and make sure that we can bring them into the core of downtown. And the city is already partnering with different private owners to either lease or provide opportunities to help promote that and share that information and make those parking lots available. And the county also is open to allowing public use of their lots after hours when their employees are not parking there. So there's plenty of parking when you look at this plan. We just need to find a better way to get people to the core of downtown. And then, just kind of highlighting the pedestrian circulation, as we looked at, what's appropriate in a downtown setting as far as how far people are willing to walk. We understand Brevard has our challenges with topography, and that certainly it's much easier to walk, north to south because of, you're not having to cross Broad Street or Caldwell Street because of the signals and the timing of that. But you do have a lot of challenges with the topography there. So, if we can find creative ways to help promote people to walk, it's really a quarter of a mile is more than sufficient for a lot of people. And when you're living in other cities, so we have a lot of parking opportunities. And also looking at the county campus, there's a lot of great resources and kind of a pleasant experience already if you walk on some of those streets. It's really just promoting that connectivity to get from there to downtown, to the core, to really help help people understand the opportunities there are for parking. And then we really looked at the bike boulevards as well. It's trying to think, that was a key component of some of the survey results, of trying to think about how we can connect. There's a lot of connection, with the Greenway and, a connection to outdoor recreation that throughout kind of the outside of the downtown core and the city and throughout the county. So we really wanted to make sure that we were accommodating a safe way that would help you cross through downtown. And so, as we mentioned before, on Broad Street and Main Street, while we want to have some shared travel lanes, those would not be promoted for, families or, sort of inexperienced riders, that might not feel as safe. But we do have a lot of opportunity with using Morgan Street and Jordan Street and creating bike boulevards that follow the direction of traffic there to really safely kind of access downtown, and then help put you at core locations of parking where we could have long-term parking for commuters who are coming here downtown to work, or if you want to stay and shop all day or do different activities. There certainly are opportunities for long-term parking and short-term parking, but we'll kind of go through in more detail what's the details of how these bike boulevards could work. But we're looking at using Johnson Street as sort of the key connector that could then get you to the college and move you on to further locations for outdoor recreation. But you also have connections to the Greenway and to the neighborhoods that kind of go off of Johnson and Gaston Street after you use Jordan and Morgan Street as your connectors into downtown. And as we mentioned, there's definitely opportunities to have some short-term bike parking on Main Street, in front of our businesses, but potentially we can look at using the alleyways to help provide opportunities to make it easier for bikes to come off of Jordan Street or even Probart Street perhaps, but also making sure that we're promoting that signage and helping direct people to different parts of downtown, as well as other local areas of interest. When you look at the bottom right, we're going to propose Jordan Street could have a lot of improvements to make it more pedestrian and bike friendly, and really kind of keep you out of the congestion of Main Street, but really have good direct access to downtown. And so looking at the detail of West Morgan Street, this is really kind of looking at how we can create a bike lane. You'll see kind of on the right side of the road. Right now, parking is on the right side of the road, but we have the width, if this is a one-way street with a single lane, to locate a dedicated bike lane on one side and locate the parking on the other side. And then, in the near term, that could be accomplished with just some striping. And then in the longer term, we certainly could look at other ways to help beautify and landscape in some of the in-between spaces, between those, parking spaces, to help make it a more pleasant experience, and also have a more consistent appearance with other areas throughout downtown. And then when we look at East Jordan Street, this is kind of going westbound, the other direction, so that, similarly on the top, you see kind of ghosted in here, the light gray is the existing condition. So you see where the parking is really on the right side of the street. But, here we can also look at locating the parking on the left side of the street, and, maybe even have some potential shared loading and parking spaces. But, because of this location, particularly at the intersection of Broad Street, right now you don't really have a lot of visibility there, and it's pretty dangerous to be able to make a right turn lane or a right lane turn there with the signals and not being able to see traffic. So there's not a whole lot of traffic here, so there's opportunity here to make this just a single lane that stops at the light and really has no turn on red, especially if we're able to get the signals to change more frequently, and really help make that a little safer. And then longer term, this is really showing kind of a little bit more drastic change of, longer term, if we could even look at, finding other parking options, you could really enhance this as a stronger pedestrian and bike street by narrowing the street width, maintaining the bike lane and a single lane of traffic, but widening the planting strip there to create more green space and trees that really could follow the whole length of Jordan Street. And as you go further east towards the farmers market, certainly there's areas where the sidewalk doesn't really continue. We would focus on extending that sidewalk and greenery to help lead you all the way down to the farmers market. And with the bike boulevards, you also end up, as you'll see here on West Jordan Street, you don't always have the bike lane. When you have sort of single direction traffic, you have a bike lane, but when you have two ways, it really becomes a share lane. So just having enough signage to help indicate that will help maintain the safety. And then, we're looking, you kind of get a sneak peek here at some of the initial thoughts about how we could improve Jordan Street. And so, we've looked at, to help provide access to the parking lots that are on either side of Jordan Street. This is the city parking lot, and then also the private parking lot behind the old bank building. That if we could change the traffic pattern and have two-way traffic just on that part of the block, we could have more direct access to those parking for people that are coming from Caldwell Street. And that could also help to minimize the amount of traffic that needs to come down from Broad Street, onto Jordan Street. And so, there is opportunity here to create more of a sort of pedestrian-focused event street. It certainly could be still open to traffic, but have opportunity for, more green space, more seating. One of the ideas here is that, if Broad Street is so, kind of loud and busy because of the amount of traffic on it, that if we have more opportunity to provide seating on Jordan Street, we could help bring, some of the pedestrian traffic into that area and create a more lively zone. We certainly would maintain access on Times Arcade, but hopefully could look at, minimizing some of the traffic in that location. And this is some, a proposed sketch of what that could look like, with the shared street. There's a lot of ways to do a shared street concept. We certainly could make it to where it could have, more access for some vehicles, and look at how we can have sort of some smaller vehicle loading access, to help with the businesses. But there's ways to kind of help promote the pedestrian and make vehicles feel uncomfortable, that this is more of a pedestrian space that helps slow them down and be more cautious, and really helps, make it feel more pedestrian and bike friendly. And certainly, hopefully long-term trying to, relocate and bury the power lines would really change the overall appearance of that street. So we'll take a quick stop and pause here to see if there's any questions so far before we go further into the rest of the presentation. Geraldine?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and I apologize if I'm going to be taking up a lot of space and time here, but this is my first close look at it, and it's really exciting. So I just have some questions I've noted down while you present it. I'm really excited about pedestrian crossings near the library. I think that is one of those places that we're not aware of, the fact that a lot of kids get dropped off at the rock gym or at the library and then dart over to go to the other place to wait to be picked up by a parent. So I'm always sweating it when I see kids standing there. It's just a really hard road to cross safely. So that's really wonderful to see that. I'm curious about the signage that you talked about on Broad and Caldwell Street coming from Pisgah Forest. I've always thought that there would be a great opportunity there to sort of naturally sort traffic, and the heavier type stuff can go down Caldwell, which is also more industrial in look, and then the normal vehicular traffic can go up Broad. But what I observe when I'm driving there is often, if you see out of state license plates, that people start wavering there because they're thinking they're committing to like not going into Brevard, but they didn't see it. So I feel like there would be great benefit to incorporate that, go this way if you're this, go this way if you're that, farther back, perhaps on those islands kind of thing. It's probably something you're already thinking about, but and then sort of the same on the Country Club Rosman Highway. I always think that we should really advertise that trucks go on Caldwell instead of coming into town, which they seem to just naturally want to do because that feels like the primary route. That would nicely sort things out there. The bike lanes to the library to me would be a priority, again, just because that's where kids can go on their own often at a certain age. And that is still, that sidewalk is not super bike friendly. If we're talking pie in the sky kind of plans. And then one thing, and I don't know if this has ever really come up, but I'm glad to hear that the county is interested in opening up their parking for various uses. I've always thought that there's an opportunity for overflow parking on court days to be at the library, and for people to either walk if it was clearly marked, that there's parking available, or even if, the county would start running a shuttle on those days and shuttle people back and forth to the courthouse, and that would alleviate a lot of that crazy congestion that happens around the courthouse. Johnson Street is really steep. I look forward to biking up and down that, but that might not be beginner territory for biking. And just having had a little kid on a bike that needed a lot of encouragement, that would be where I'd be pushing my son and dragging my bike up the hill there. And going down would be hair-raising too. Are you thinking at all about the connection to Bracken Preserve? Because on a good day, even on a bad day, I see a dozen people cycling from somewhere, downtown up Probart Street to go do the Bracken Trail. That's just something, again, with signage, perhaps, that we could just naturally foster them to go a certain way that's safe, because Probart is still technically doesn't have a bike lane on it. And the serious bikers don't use the sidewalk. That's not cool. So they're not going to do that. And then the alleyway onto Jordan Street, does that have to be open to traffic?
Are you talking about the Times Arcade alley? Yeah. So Times Arcade and South Alley, both, do need to maintain vehicular traffic. I think, when you look at, that's sort of the backside, and, there's people living there, there's businesses, like us to really cut off all vehicular access to those would be pretty problematic, and would probably also cause a lot more congestion. And so I think, we're looking at ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about Times Arcade, especially as to how we can, maybe try to minimize the traffic. And really, right now it's kind of confusing. A lot of visitors don't really understand, and they maybe go down that way. But with better signage, we can limit it to, those that live and work there, and maybe, very small, smaller, minimal deliveries, so that we can minimize that. But I think we have working, living alleys and downtowns, and it's a challenge to introduce and try to focus them on pedestrian, sort of experience, and take all the vehicles out, because we need the service, and that's what they really were designed for.
Right. I guess the trade-off would be, I think, that if at least the Jordan Street end of the alley was pedestrianized, or, like you said before, made unfriendly for cars, that would actually probably be beneficial to the chocolate place and to Square Root, because you would invite a little bit more mingling and perhaps seating area. My experience, again, riding with a 13-year-old who pays no attention to anything on a bike in downtown, we do go down Jordan Street. And that alleyway, I feel like every single time, because we sort of either are on the sidewalk or maybe going, just staying close to the parked cars there. And it's just so blind with the walls of the alley, and people tend to just kind of shoot out and then pull out because they can't see with the parked cars. And that's kind of a hot spot, especially if we're really thinking of making that a popular bike route, which I absolutely love. There's a potential there for some dangerous situations. And then the last thing, and then I'll let it go, I just noted down water features, seeing Jordan Street looking so beautiful. And I will grab a shovel, Melanie, if we can start putting all the power lines underground tomorrow. That would be great. But I feel like for a town that is in a county that's the land of waterfalls, we are very dry downtown, And you often see people with, just sitting somewhere looking hot and exhausted, and just sitting near water is often, so has a cooling effect. So again, that would probably be the other phase, or phase 3, but I would always love to think of water features too. They don't have to be big. They don't have to be giant, wedding cake type of look. They can be relatively small. I think they would be really a wonderful complement. Right. I'm done.
No, I appreciate that. And I think just to acknowledge, we are planning to meet with the city, sort of trails and parks, committee, and kind of coordinating those routes to Bracken, and, the continuation of the city, greenway. Those certainly are things that we want to help coordinate and make sure that we're finding the right ways to connect those. So, we certainly will help to coordinate that moving forward. So just as we're going to kind of dive into the specifics of sort of the downtown core, and this is really just a diagram that kind of helps sort of outline our key points that we're going to be talking about. So as we've mentioned, we're really trying to focus access on, trying to on Jordan Street or either Probart Street, but get people to these parking areas and find creative ways and, nice ways to help enhance their experience that'll help bring them, to Main Street or Broad Street. And so what we've looked at are trying to create along those alleyways that are the gold arrows, that if we are using those as, pedestrian and bike connectors, how can we really emphasize those areas on Main Street and create a more inviting experience? And so we're kind of focused on creating these nodes at the mid blocks and alley intersections. And so this is just an overall plan that kind of shows the scope of, what we're looking at, sort of, beautification and enhancement for downtown. We certainly do not have time to go through all of this in one meeting. So we're going to just focus on a couple of key blocks and talk about the key sort of elements of those that get repeated throughout downtown. So one of the first key components is really looking at the curb extensions, and as you've seen a little bit in some of the diagrams already, really looking at those at the intersections. Those provide a lot of opportunities to really help shorten the distance that pedestrians have to cross the street and improve visibility, because you don't have cars that are parked right up to the intersections like we have now. It also provides opportunities for additional public space and seating, and just, more landscaping and planters, so that, we can actually have larger and healthier trees instead of trees in these little 4x4 planting, grates. We're really trying to minimize, the use of, grates that really don't promote healthy trees. So and then as we were developing our plan, we also were trying to make sure that we're not creating a solution that is just repetitive down the street throughout downtown that doesn't really take into account existing conditions. And so we've looked at, what are some of the primary uses on the core streets of downtown. And you can see here that, by block, it really does vary a lot. So, its train changes drastically as you move from, 2 blocks off of, Broad Street, but also, even on 1 block on either side, you have a lot of variety of the types of uses and how people might want to use the space. And so when we looked at sort of one example on West Main Street, this is the block from Caldwell to Broad Street, at the intersection of Times Arcade and North Alley. And so, I think, Geraldine, to your point about the idea of trying to help discourage vehicular traffic, we're looking at using those mid-block bump outs. You do end up kind of losing some parking spaces, but we are able to create much larger, more inviting spaces for benches and tables and different types of seating, and that helps to really free up the rest of the sidewalk. We're very limited because of DOT and our restrictions, that it's not as easy for us to just widen the sidewalks, and so right now you have a very kind of repetitive pattern of tree, bench, light pole, other furnishings that people are putting out. So if there are ways, that we can try to concentrate some of these larger, gathering areas under, areas of, larger shade and trees that are centralized on the block, that helps free up some of that space, the length of the block to have more, pedestrian, movement and wider sidewalks. And so, the sidewalk isn't really changing much because of our limitations, where we have the primary pedestrian zone, which is the concrete, and then a paver zone, for furnishings or, the light poles and, those kind of things. But, we're looking at, trying to, focus those seating areas on the alleys and really enhance, the alleys to help draw people in. A couple of other things that we're looking at, really extending and promoting the mid-block crosswalk to help, make it easier for people to cross safely. And, there's an opportunity there, because we are using those middle turning lanes as also loading, that we could maybe create a more restricted area for loading so that we can avoid potentially dangerous situations of having vehicles, kind of stretching the entire block. And hopefully that kind of designates an area where they can park. And we're also showing opportunities for, this is potential pocket park as an opportunity where the old Emporium building is. We don't have a lot of opportunities for parks, and what's happening on Caldwell Street with Clemson Plaza is certainly creating needed, valuable space, but it would be nice to look at other sort of protected, less noisy areas. And so these bump outs start to create those little pocket parks and gathering areas, but there could be other opportunities to create larger spaces as well. And this is looking at the block on East Main Street, over by the courthouse. Similarly on South Alley, you've got the alley that leads back to parking behind the courthouse, and then South Alley leads to parking, back on Jordan Street. That the part of that alley has already been enhanced, but there's certainly ways to extend it further. But we looked at creating sort of larger seating area in the center there as well, that also creates opportunity for more seating around the gazebo if that continues to be used, for outdoor events. That could be a nice amenity as well. And, we're still showing, kind of larger trees on the corners and in these bump outs where we have more planting area. And we are showing, smaller trees in the middle of the block. Those are in larger kind of planting areas than we have now. They're more of like a 4x8 kind of space that would, help promote healthier trees and have more landscaping around them. But, and there could be an opportunity, we're working hopefully with the county to look at some of these ideas and think about, are there ways to expand and maybe modify the wall over by the gazebo to create a larger seating space. And then this is the section of South Broad Street. This is Jordan Street on the left and Main Street on the right. And so, this has a little bit different feel and is, a little bit noisier in some ways than Main Street because it has more traffic, with 2 lanes going northbound and 1 lane going southbound. But, we looked at ways that we could also incorporate those, mid-block bump outs to create an area of refuge for some additional seating. But, as we mentioned, there's also opportunities to really draw people around the corner to, a quieter, more protected, pedestrian-friendly area, that would have more opportunities for public seating. And these are, kind of some ideas and illustrations on what some of these bump outs could look like. This is on the top right, the entry to Times Arcade alley. Certainly it would need to allow some vehicular traffic, but it definitely discourages and has a different feel with different pavers that kind of introduce that would discourage those who don't know that they should be going down there and can park there, that they should be going down there, but also just helps to kind of emphasize and the pedestrian experience. There's opportunities to enhance the sculpture that's there, maybe relocate it and make it more of a feature and provide seating. We've already talked, with Platt about the opportunity to look at taking over some of their parking so that, when people are backing up, they're not going to be backing up into those sidewalks, or people may not be paying as close attention. And we certainly could look at, adding some lighting or different ways to make that feel more inviting. Similarly, on the other side of the park, there's opportunities with the way that bump out is situated. If that ever was to become a pocket park, you could have combination of plaza and green space and start to use those as smaller event areas, and utilizing the bump out seating that also kind of helps make those alleys and potential pocket parks feel larger because they expand into a larger area. And then this is really just kind of, showing the connectivity of the alley and how, we're trying to think about this, not just as individual pockets, but also thinking about the overall connectivity and, what helps to draw people. And, there's opportunities for treatment of the paving or, ways to incorporate additional art to help promote people kind of moving, all the way from Jordan Street, all the way to the other side. If we go to the next slide, that's this is showing North Alley leading up to Probart Street. So if we have a, consistent design themes and features that help draw you, that helps bring you multiple blocks and help to connect you, to Main Street and some of these other businesses that are on, sort of the secondary streets. And so these are some ideas and for improvements to North Alley by hunters and gatherers. With right now the city's already kind of tried to create that as more public space with tables and lighting, but perhaps we can do a little more to have more lighting so it feels lighter and more inviting. Maybe look at some architectural elements with arches or additional plantings. Maybe we look at smaller tables that help to provide more space for people passing through, and maybe some of those larger tables come out to the larger area on Main Street. But really just try to make it a little more inviting and more interesting to help draw people through the space. And then we can also look at trying to clean up, the alleyway coming from Broad Street and making that turn, that, we know once again, there's going to be vehicular traffic. What we've labeled the potential event space is actually parking, I think for Transylvania Times, some of these private areas that could be potential partnerships or opportunities when we do have events that you could create these little nodes of activity and special event spaces. If you really spent, some effort kind of improving these alleyways and making those connections, more inviting and friendly and, kind of managing the traffic and pedestrian flow. And, looking at the parking area, the city is looking to lease the parking space next to Brevard Marketplace. And so, potentially creating a more formal parking with sidewalk and, curb there, but, we could maybe integrate some loading space for smaller loading vehicles that would help alleviate some of the pressure on Main Street. And then looking at South Alley, as we mentioned, part of it's already been improved on the area next to Main Street, but there's opportunities to really extend that all the way to Jordan Street and try to incorporate, murals or certain paving patterns and some better lighting to help draw you to that space. And then, also working with, adjacent property owners, in all of these situations to how we can help beautify and kind of clean up those areas and work together. So, we could potentially extend the space. It's hard to really extend the pathway at the same level, so it really needs to be at the grade there, but maybe there's opportunities with lighting and different planters and seating that we can help that feel more a part of the alley at the front, closer to Main Street. And then Gaston Street is another key connector street that we were looking at, with the parking that's the First Baptist parking is really kind of, some spaces are dedicated to them, but they are, as well as some other adjacent properties are, kind of shared use that they allow the public to use. And maybe, there's ways to look at extending similar to Jordan Street, looking at beautifying Gaston Street and provide narrow the travel lanes to provide more seating so that we could create a more inviting space so that when you turn the corner from Main Street, there's tables or, landscaping or lighting that helps connect this part of downtown, to the rest of downtown and help draw you down this way and help create that connection that, helps draw people with signage, down to the library and makes that, connection all the way down. There's also opportunities for, long-term bike storage, maybe looking at some of these leftover spaces that could, between these, so you don't have to lose parking, but you could promote, access for bikes for longer term, for employees or others coming down to spend the day downtown. So I guess before we jump into loading zones, I know we're going to kind of hold for a lot of questions, but if there's any sort of quick questions that anyone has on what we've talked about so far, we can talk about those now. All right, and so, loading zones, we just wanted to go over, we took a hard look at this and also, sent out the survey and wanted to share with everyone some of the information that we gathered. We know we're not going to solve this problem but we wanted to think creatively about some of the strategies of how we could help manage this in the future. And so, these are some of the results of the surveys. I think, we had about 20 something responses on this survey and from a wide variety of different business types. And so, it's clear that we have, a variety of different service delivery vehicles of different sizes. We've tried to kind of look at where are the most popular and most problematic areas for delivery vehicle location, and certainly Main Street, the center lane, is one of the most popular. And then, if we flip over to the next slide, we also try to look at the timing of deliveries and, how long these are, taking place. So as we're kind of looking at some of these, key, ideas of, how we know they're happening kind of all day long, right at the core of the day, at the busiest, most congested times in downtown. Generally they're not taking up too much time. However, what we don't really see in the results of this are some of these delivery carriers that are parking and, on each block and making multiple deliveries to multiple businesses and kind of working their way through downtown, which causes some additional congestion. Some of the other comments that we received in the initial survey that wasn't specific to loading, really talked about some of the hazards with, conditions of a lot of the loading vehicles blocking the center lane of Main Street. We know, just like everywhere else in the world, service vehicles and deliveries are just becoming, more of a problem, and as downtown continues to grow, this demand is going to increase. And we do want to make sure that we're creating a safe environment. Every now and then you do see some unsafe kind of blocking of pedestrian and vehicular situations, but whatever we can do to help, kind of alleviate that, we want to look at opportunities. So, and then just kind of the unspoken of, when trucks are trying to find spaces, they certainly are, idling or, circling the block, trying to find places that they can park. And that really just contributes to the congestion and noise and general pollution that, we have downtown. And so, we've done some research and kind of looked at what other people are doing and trying to find some, new innovative ways to deal with this. And so, some of the ideas that we've come up with that we, certainly are not forcing anything, these are all opportunities that really need to be vetted, and there's no way to know if they're going to work until we test them in downtown and really get real data to understand where the problems are and how we can address them. But we're seeing other communities that are trying to come up with shared flex zones where you don't have as many dedicated loading zones because certain hours of the day those aren't really used, and that takes up valuable curb space that could be used for parking. So there could be opportunities to, have some spaces that are shared to where those could actually be used by the businesses to help with their deliveries and pickups and, drop-offs. You can also use that to help with some of our older, and less mobile visitors to downtown. That it makes it easier to drop off and kind of load and unload for accessibility parking and not have to only rely on the ADA parking spaces, but it also allows for opportunities to have maybe 30-minute commercial loading, but you could have 5 or 10-minute active loading by others, so those spaces would be available for larger vehicles. We've also looked at opportunities of using smart zones that trucks could look at the spaces as you see in the picture on the bottom, where they can see what spaces are available. Certainly this is an example where they're charging for those. We wouldn't have to do that, but there's ways to just help it to make it more efficient, so that as they approach downtown, when they're a few minutes out, they can book a space, they can see what's available, and then when they check out, then they know that space becomes available for others. So that helps alleviate some of the pressures of having, like you see here in the top photo, of having multiple vehicles kind of backing up and blocking the space at once, if we can help to see when the spaces might be available. And certainly longer term, looking at some of the delivery consolidation, there's ways to have certain areas that are dedicated to loading zones that are in the least congested areas that are always available for unloading. We do have providers that provide to multiple businesses, so there's ways to look at helping to consolidate that, but that certainly would be a more concerted effort and require a lot more coordination. But just wanted to kind of start thinking about ways to start manage it. We don't have really many restrictions at all, and other communities do, and so there's ways that we can start to be more proactive as and get a head start on this problem. And so one of the things that we wanted to potentially suggest or consider is that if there are, because of the types of zones, could we look at dedicating some of the areas on Main Street, as those are primarily for the larger vehicles that really can't make the turns onto some of these smaller streets, and then have areas on some of the secondary streets that could be shared loading for smaller trucks where they can make those turns. And then another thing that we're showing in blue, in the past, we have, the city has implemented the short-term kind of carry-out spaces. There could be opportunity on each block to maybe put 2 of those spaces together, so that those could work as both, kind of take out short-term parking, but could be available for shared, smaller delivery vehicles, also for the businesses. Maybe by putting those 2 together on a block, you can have a little bit more opportunity and make it easier to access those. But some of the, and then also on Broad Street, if you have vehicles coming broad, rather than having them turn down a lot of these smaller streets, if they have a larger zone going each direction, that they could access that and a lot easier than trying to drive through some of these other secondary streets. And so, like I said, this is just preliminary ideas of how we could maybe start to manage or come up with some innovative strategies to help promote certain areas for certain types of vehicles to help alleviate some of the congestion. So that is pretty much an overview of everything that we've been working on the preliminary master plan. So we certainly want to open it up to comments and questions. And also, I know it's getting a little bit closer to 10 o'clock, so we do have a survey that if you want to provide some additional feedback, we'll put that link in the chat so you can follow up as well. We're also going to make this available online, so you could look at it again in the future if there was something that you had a question about.
Are the questions open to the public?
This probably will be put on the city's website, and so it would have an opportunity for the public to provide feedback. But we are also trying to give you, as a key stakeholder, a more direct access and opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, so questions I'll put in the chat or some other vehicle, but not here today in this presentation.
Yeah, we're not planning to advertise all of the questions that, we're not going to put all these answers into directly out to the public.
I'll jump in. This is Ryan Olson. Thanks, Melanie. That was a really good presentation, and it's exciting. I'll echo Geraldine. Geraldine, a lot of what you shared, I was here nodding along, listening to, in full agreement. As a not a business owner, but a nonprofit based on West Jordan Street, it's beyond exciting to see some of the potential concepts there. This look and feel would just really advance, I feel like, our downtown towards the sort of walkable destination that I think most would like to see it move into. I think you guys have been really comprehensive in thinking through traffic patterns, loading, et cetera. But just quickly on the recreation side, as that's something where I kind of hang my hat with the Heart of Brevard and my board member work there. I do want to echo Geraldine just as far as making sure it's clear that if you come and you park downtown, we have such a unique opportunity to get into the forest. It's not 100 yards outside of town. It is a little bit further, but how are we moving people so that in these future years, even though the roundabout will be what it is at the physical forest interchange, but I do expect that area to feel only more and more congested. And I do think people will start to look for other places to base their recreation. I don't know if that's going to mean a shuttle service or that they're just riding or hiking or walking from downtown. But as part of the identity of this area, making sure that through this master planning process, we're really thinking about not only the community members riding in and out of town, which is arguably more important, but that this is a hub and a center point in the community from which you can recreate. And I don't know how that fits in. Maybe it's more in just the signage and the wayfinding, but continuing to think about that as a priority for what Brevard is. It's not a marketing identity. It's what we are. I mean, it's a big part of who we are, but it is a huge part of the branding. If you come to Brevard right now, that isn't obvious. It isn't even necessarily obvious, where you are as like a center point, but with Bracken so close and the connectivity work off of Bracken into kind of greater Pisgah and over to the Davidson River Campground, the Joel Branch Connector, things happening right now. I hope we can continue to find ways to make sure that that is a part of the identity of the reworking and the thinking around this master plan process. That's it for me.
Thanks, Ryan. No, we appreciate that and definitely agree that that's something to be important to think about. I think at a master plan level, we're trying to identify some of these things, and certainly will require the work of multiple committees and different parts of city planning department as well to help facilitate that.
If I could just jump in and kind of echo a few things that Ryan has said, I think this is a great opportunity, and thank you so much for all your work on this, Melanie. This, I'm sure, is a labor of love. So much work. But with sort of the connectivity to downtown and thinking about, the Heart of Brevard being, it has the potential to be this huge center point for both, residents and our community members, that we can come downtown, park downtown, and then go out to the forest and then still come back. I think that would give some real opportunity for us as business owners to be able to capitalize on, individuals, both residents and visitors, being able to shop before and after, or eat before and after sort of this outdoor recreation opportunity. Is there any more planning around sort of like railroad and connecting with the depot and making sure that where that connects with Probart, that there's actually like real bike lanes, not just in the road? I would just like to feel, safe as like a parent taking my kid, out to this amazing bike path that we have, to be able to get there safely, and make sure it looks like it's it's intentional and a part of our brand as well.
Yeah, I think we're kind of trying to stay within our scope within, some of the downtown core. And so we're trying to avoid kind of creeping too far out, into the railroad district. But I definitely agree that we want to promote those connections and make sure that they're safe. So we certainly are going to have to work through that. If we don't put any boundaries, we would just keep growing this plan and just kind of taking over all of Brevard. And that's, we're kind of focusing on a certain area, but we certainly will take that into consideration
And then lastly, with the new crosswalks that you've proposed, will those be signal crosswalks, like across Caldwell and across Broad Street?
So those would probably be, I guess, different based on the situation. So I think there's opportunities. I even think, Blue Zones project is working with the city and looking at grants to help get some signal, crosswalks so that when a person, approaches it, they signal it and it flashes. So it could be something like that. That's a flashing, or, it depends on, with DOT where we don't want to put a ton of new lights necessarily. So that would be like downtown. So we'll have to coordinate that and kind of work at what makes the most sense at each location. But I think as a starting point, we definitely want to make sure we're at least repairing the sidewalks and creating the connections and providing the safety, and appropriate signal.
Melanie, can I just really quickly jump in to Kevy's question? We are funded for the bike path stretch from where it ends now on the bridge by the depot all the way up to Main Street. So, going up to the top of Probart Street and then cutting through the George Lenz development. And then you'd be on West Main Street. So there is an opportunity there to connect and be more safely. I'm hoping that, kids will actually ride to the middle school, for example, too. But that's going to, work nicely into what the Heart of Brevard district is doing.
So I think I was just looking.
Can I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead, Linda.
So hard for me. Well, no, I don't know. I might be the only downtown resident here. I'm very excited. It just looks great. Thank you for all your work. And I was on the walkability Heart of Brevard committee, and a lot of the issues that we brought up, you're addressing, and that's really great. So I don't know if I'll still be here alive when you get it all done, but, or if you get it all done. That was my husband's question. Is this one going to get done? Because there have been other city plans that kind of sitting in the vault somewhere. So hopefully this one gets done. But yeah, thank you, because it's very exciting, and it just is going to add so much to this town. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And we are hopeful that we can work with the city and come up with pieces out of this that we can start to implement over time, and start to really help change some of the traffic patterns and pedestrian and bike patterns, and make a big difference in how people move and use downtown, and slowly implement some of the beautification and more challenging parts of the project on some of the challenging areas of downtown infrastructure. I do see there's a question in the chat regarding the hotel property, and we certainly have not sort of designed for the hotel. We're trying to be open, and they're going through a process with the city on conditional zoning and improvements for that. But we are hopeful that we can coordinate with them and help create a some sort of plan that would address some of these questions about, truck delivery and traffic congestion, and some of those issues there. So, we agree that's kind of a big catalyst for development. There's other parcels throughout downtown that could have a similar effect and really change, the overall feel and of downtown and how these things play out. So we're really certainly trying to create a framework that we can then be better prepared to deal with some of this future development. I know that's probably not answering the question, but we're planning to help coordinate with them and see what we can do to integrate their design into this plan.
I have another question, and this is just probably just a personal question because I'm curious regarding parking. Is the new paid parking lot down at the American Legion a city lot, or is it, does anybody know, or is it a private lot from the American Legion? I just noticed walking the dog that it was a paid lot.
I can answer that. My name is Lee Huffman with the city. That is a private paid.
Lee, I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure. I think Lee, we may have lost you, but and I don't know, Nicole or Geraldine, if you know this more specifically. I guess my understanding is that the city is was leasing that, but it looks like Lee just put in the chat that this is a private parking lot. I think, you know, part of the overall parking strategy is, you know, in helping to promote signage and provide access is, you know, really working with local property owners that have private parking lots that we can create, you know, sort of a comprehensive, you know, signage and help direct people to these locations. And then once they get there, help them to understand how they can get to, you know, key downtown businesses, or, you know, kind of whether we're directing them to sort of downtown, or like we said, or we've discussed before, that we could certainly have signage and, you know, maps and kiosks that help direct them to other recreational areas and parts of Brevard as well. All right, well, are there any other questions or concerns about some of the ideas that we've talked about, or you know, anything that you don't want to see sort of further developed as we move forward in the final master plan?
The only thing I would add, and again, Melanie, you've answered this already in the sense that like the scope needs to be limited, but I see this as kind of a crux moment to either integrate the railroad district into the downtown, which I'm now kind of speaking without my Heart of Brevard hat on, because I know that that district does not extend into that area. But I think it's a major blind spot to have it not on the table as an obvious growth area for connectivity. And I don't really know if that ship has sailed. And so it's just simply not going to be a part of this process, or it's going to be a part of another process. And my hope is the latter, if the former is true, because I think for a number of reasons, we continue to struggle with this piece. And I don't feel like a town our size should. I feel like we should be nimble enough to really think about, let's go ahead and make those connections as you see people darting across Caldwell, and as we continue to push the larger vehicular traffic onto Caldwell. It just, it will become an island, and yet ironically connected via the bike path. So maybe that's how we're thinking people are going to get there. And the reality is they're going to still walk down Caldwell, and they're going to still dart across, I would argue, maybe the most dangerous point in all of greater downtown. And with the marketplace down that way, with the restaurant down that way, I mean, people are already moving that direction. So again, that's kind of opening a Pandora's box. And I don't mean to go there with like 5 minutes to go, but I feel like it needs to be said.
Mm-hmm. No, we appreciate that, Ryan. I think we all agree with all of the things that you're saying, and it's just finding the appropriate way to integrate that and make sure that we're doing it the right way. So,
and we did kind of take in consideration some of the more regional bike routes and looking at the proposed bike plans for the whole, not just Transylvania County, but the whole western North Carolina areas, proposed routes and some of the existing bike paths. Just considering where we were putting the paths downtown, we wanted to make sure that we were sending people in a direction that made sense with all those other plans that were being done. So even though it wasn't necessarily shown on drawings we presented today, that kind of was taken into consideration of how do you connect over towards the railroad district and that greenway. And while the last little bit might varied the exact connection that it takes, which street. I mean, that was kind of taken into account of, why we're putting the bike routes where we did within downtown, that we're, sending people in an appropriate direction that makes sense to tie into neighborhoods or existing routes.
All right. Well, we are getting close to our 10 o'clock time, so we certainly want to thank everyone for taking your time this morning to kind of listen in and provide your feedback. And we certainly will take this back to the rest of the Downtown Master Plan Committee, and also hopefully discuss some of these ideas with the remaining stakeholder meetings that we're going to have throughout the rest of the week. So this presentation will be available and posted on the city's website, and certainly want to encourage you, if you have additional information or comments, questions, to try to filter that through the Heart of Brevard, through Nicole. Her information, her email is on the screen, and then hopefully everyone can see there should be a link in the chat box to where, if you'd like to provide some additional feedback in a written form, you certainly can go to that link. It's only a couple of minor questions just to kind of understand who attended, which stakeholder meeting, and just to see if we're meeting the objectives and goals that we have set out, and that the community has set out, and any other ideas that you have that you'd like to be considered. So we really appreciate your time, and look forward to providing more information in the future as this process evolves. Nicole, do you want to say anything else?
No, thank you guys for being here. Lots of great feedback and participation. Melanie, obviously, thank you for your time. And if you need anything, just send me an email. And if I can't answer your question, certainly we'll direct things to Melanie and her team.
Well, thank you, Nicole. And I certainly want to reiterate, this is very much a team effort. We've definitely been working here diligently with Arbor Engineering, and then also with the Downtown Master Plan Committee. So, we're all working towards a common goal here. So with a lot of people involved. So we appreciate everyone that's been involved in the process.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.